Have you ever wondered why the people you care about the most can also make you feel the most insecure, distant, or emotionally overwhelmed? Why a delayed text can feel like rejection, or why closeness sometimes feels comforting and, at the same time, suffocating? These reactions are not random. They are often rooted in something deeper, something learned long before the relationship even began. Attachment styles are not labels meant to box people in. They are emotional habits. They are patterns that form when we are young, as our nervous system learns what closeness feels like, what safety means, and what to expect from others. Over time, these early lessons become automatic responses. We don't think them through, we feel them, and then we react. Some people grow up learning that connection is reliable. When they feel close to someone, their body stays calm. When conflict happens, they don't immediately assume abandonment. This is often called secure attachment, but what really matters is not the name. What matters is the experience of emotional safety. The sense that closeness does not threaten your independence and distance does not threaten your worth. Others learn a different lesson. For some, love becomes closely linked with anxiety. Attention feels soothing, but uncertainty feels unbearable. These individuals may overthink tone, timing, and silence, not because they want drama, but because their emotional system learned early on that connection could disappear without warning. Books like Attached by Amir Levine and Rachel Heller describe how this anxiety is not a flaw in character, but a strategy for survival that once made sense. Then there are those who learn that closeness comes with a cost, that needing others leads to disappointment, criticism, or loss of control. Emotional distance becomes a form of self-protection. Independence feels safer than vulnerability. Avoidance, in this sense, is not coldness. It is caution. It is the nervous system saying, I've learned this before and I know how it ends. What makes relationships especially complex is that these patterns don't exist in isolation. Anxious and avoidant styles often find each other, not because they are compatible, but because they are familiar. One seeks reassurance, the other seeks space, and both end up reinforcing each other's fears. The anxious partner feels rejected. The avoidant partner feels overwhelmed. Neither is trying to hurt the other, yet both feel misunderstood. Emotional patterns are powerful because they operate below conscious thought. You may logically know that a partner cares, yet emotionally feel unimportant. You may value intimacy, yet feel the urge to pull away when it becomes real. This disconnect between logic and emotion is where most relationship conflict lives. The hopeful part is this: attachment styles are not permanent identities. They are patterns, and patterns can be changed with awareness, consistent experiences, and emotionally SA. Relationships. Understanding your attachment style is not about blame, it is about clarity. When you can name what you are feeling and why, you gain choice. You can pause instead of react. You can communicate instead of assume. Healthy relationships are not built by people without wounds. They are built by people who recognize their patterns and take responsibility for them. Emotional security grows when we learn that closeness does not require losing ourselves, and independence does not require emotional distance. When you understand attachment, relationships stop feeling like a mystery and start feeling like a process of learning, unlearning, and slowly creating emotional experiences that teach the nervous system a new story, a story where connection feels safer, conflict feels manageable, and love feels less like a threat and more like a place to rest. Have you ever noticed how some people seem to effortlessly connect with others, while for others, even a simple conversation can feel charged with tension or anxiety? This is not just personality, it's deeply tied to the way we form attachments. Attachment is the invisible thread that guides how we seek closeness, respond to intimacy, and even interpret everyday interactions. From the earliest moments of life, humans are wired to seek connection because our survival depends on it. The way our caregivers respond to our needs consistently, inconsistently, or with emotional distance leaves an imprint on our emotional system that often lasts well into adulthood. Those early experiences are not just memories, they are encoded in our nervous system, shaping how we perceive love, trust, and security. People with secure attachment, for example, have typically experienced reliable and responsive caregiving. They learn that their feelings matter, that their needs are valid, and that seeking closeness is safe. As adults, this translates into the ability to balance intimacy and independence. They can approach relationships with confidence and communicate needs without fear of rejection. In contrast, Individuals with anxious attachment often experienced unpredictable responses in their early relationships. Sometimes their emotional bids were met with warmth, sometimes with neglect or criticism. As a result, they develop a heightened sensitivity to perceived rejection or abandonment. A delayed reply, a neutral tone, or a small disagreement can trigger intense worry and self-doubt. These patterns are not weaknesses. They are survival strategies that once helped them manage uncertainty. On the other side, avoidant attachment emerges when early caregivers were emotionally distant or consistently unresponsive. For these individuals, relying on others felt unsafe, and they learned to suppress their needs and emotions. Emotional independence becomes a shield, intimacy feels threatening, and closeness often triggers discomfort. Understanding these patterns is not about labeling or limiting oneself. It is about recognizing why certain dynamics keep repeating in relationships. Once we identify our attachment style, we gain insight into our emotional triggers and relationship habits. We can pause, reflect, and respond rather than react automatically. This awareness opens the door to healthier connections. It allows us to cultivate trust, communicate openly, and experience closeness without fear. The invisible threads of attachment can be untangled, rewoven, and strengthened, helping us build relationships where both connection and personal growth coexist harmoniously. Have you ever wondered why certain patterns keep repeating in your relationships, even when you logically know they don't serve you? The truth is that many of our adult relationship behaviors are deeply rooted in the emotional patterns we developed during childhood. From the moment we are born, our earliest interactions with caregivers teach us what to expect from others, how safe the world feels, and whether our emotions are valid. These experiences shape not only our beliefs about relationships, but also the automatic ways our nervous system responds to intimacy, conflict, and connection. When a child consistently experiences responsive and nurturing care, they learn that expressing needs is safe and that others will meet them with empathy and support. This early training creates what psychologists call secure emotional patterns, which allow for healthy communication, trust, and emotional regulation later in life. However, when a child encounters inconsistent, unpredictable, or emotionally unavailable caregiving, they develop different strategies to manage these uncertainties. One common pattern is anxious attachment, where the individual becomes hypervigilant to the moods and behaviors of others, constantly seeking reassurance. Another pattern is avoidance, where the individual suppresses emotional needs, distances themselves, and values independence above intimacy as a form of self-protection. These patterns are not conscious choices. They are survival strategies that help the child navigate an unpredictable world. Over time, they solidify into deeply ingrained habits that influence how adults respond to conflict, intimacy, and even love itself. The challenge is that these childhood lessons often replay in relationships, sometimes subtly and other times explosively. We may find ourselves drawn to partners who trigger old fears or who replicate familiar emotional dynamics, even if they are unhealthy. Understanding that these patterns are learned, not innate, is crucial. Awareness is the first step toward change. By observing our reactions, identifying our attachment style, and reflecting on how our early experiences shape them, we gain the power to break automatic cycles. Therapy, supportive relationships, and intentional self-reflection can help retrain emotional responses, creating new patterns that foster trust, security, and genuine intimacy. Recognizing and addressing these emotional patterns allows us to stop repeating the past unconsciously, and instead build relationships that are consciously nurturing, stable, and emotionally fulfilling. What once felt automatic can become deliberate, and what once felt unavoidable can be transformed into choice. Have you ever stopped to consider why some relationships feel effortless while others leave us anxious, frustrated, or drained? Much of this comes down to the difference between love, anxiety, avoidance, and emotional safety, the fundamental emotional states that guide how we connect with others. Love, in its healthiest form, is not just a feeling, it is a combination of security, trust, and mutual responsiveness. When we feel loved in this way, our nervous system relaxes, we communicate openly, and we approach conflict with curiosity rather than fear. Emotional safety is the cornerstone of this process. It is the implicit understanding that our needs, thoughts, and feelings will be met with respect and care, even when disagreements arise. Without it, love can feel unpredictable, fragile, or even threatening. Anxiety in relationships often emerges when this sense of safety is compromised. People with anxious attachment patterns frequently worry about whether they are truly valued or whether their partner might withdraw. Their emotional system is constantly scanning for signs of rejection, sometimes perceiving threats where none exist. This hypervigilance can lead to overcommunication, overthinking, and behaviors aimed at securing reassurance. The irony is that these strategies often push partners away, reinforcing the very fears they were meant to soothe. On the other hand, avoidance is rooted in a learned belief that closeness is dangerous or overwhelming. Individuals with avoidant patterns may value independence to the point of emotional distance, often downplaying their own needs or suppressing their emotions. Intimacy triggers discomfort, and conflict is often met with withdrawal rather than engagement. While avoidance protects the individual from vulnerability, it also limits deep connection and can leave both partners feeling isolated or misunderstood. Understanding these emotional patterns is critical because it allows us to recognize why we and others respond the way we do. Relationships are not just about finding someone compatible, they are about navigating these underlying emotional landscapes. By learning to identify anxious or avoidant tendencies in ourselves and our partners, we can create strategies for communication, reassurance, and trust building. Books, like The Power of Attachment by Diane Poole Heller, illustrate that these patterns are not fixed, they are dynamic, and can evolve with awareness and intentional practice. Emotional safety can be cultivated, anxiety can be soothed, and avoidance can be softened. When we understand the interplay between love, anxiety, avoidance, and emotional safety, we gain the tools to transform relationships from our reactive patterns into deliberate, conscious connections that nurture both partners and allow love to flourish without fear. Have you ever noticed that we are often drawn to people who challenge us emotionally, who trigger fears or insecurities we didn't even know we had? This is no coincidence. Humans have a tendency to gravitate toward partners who mirror the attachment patterns they experienced in early life, even if those patterns are painful or problematic. From childhood, our brains and nervous systems learn what love, closeness, and conflict feel like. We internalize these lessons and carry them into adulthood, often seeking partners who replicate familiar emotional dynamics. For someone with anxious attachment, this might mean being drawn to a partner who is inconsistent, sometimes warm and attentive, sometimes distant or unavailable. The anxiety that arises in these relationships can feel intense because it resonates with early experiences of unpredictability or fear of abandonment. For someone with avoidant attachment, attraction may favor partners who require emotional closeness or depend on them heavily. This triggers discomfort, but it also feels familiar because it mirrors early lessons about needing to protect oneself emotionally. This push and pull dynamic can create cycles where both partners are unconsciously playing out roles from their pasts. We might ask ourselves, why do I choose someone who makes me anxious? Or, why do I withdraw when someone gets close? The answer often lies in these deeply ingrained emotional patterns. Books like Attached by Amir Levine and Rachel Heller explore this phenomenon, showing how these patterns are not about compatibility in the traditional sense, but about familiarity. Awareness is the key to breaking these cycles. Once we recognize that our attraction is influenced by these early patterns, we gain the ability to pause and reflect before reacting. We can begin to choose partners not just based on familiarity or emotional triggers, but on alignment with our current values and needs. We can also work on our own emotional regulation, so that triggers from the past do not dictate our present behavior. The hope is that relationships can become spaces for growth rather than repetition of old wounds. By understanding why we are drawn to certain types of people, we empower ourselves to build healthier connections, relationships where closeness does not feel threatening, distance does not feel like rejection, and emotional triggers can be navigated with compassion and awareness. Recognizing these patterns allows us to move from unconscious repetition toward conscious, intentional love, creating partnerships that are not only familiar but also fulfilling, nurturing, and emotionally safe. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where your emotions seem to take control, leaving you reacting in ways that surprised or even frustrated you? This is often the result of deeply ingrained emotional patterns and attachment styles that operate beneath conscious awareness. Many of us enter relationships without realizing that the way we respond to conflict, closeness, or even simple interactions is influenced by these automatic patterns. For instance, someone with an anxious attachment style may interpret a delayed text, a quiet evening, or a moment of distance as a sign of rejection, even if their partner is simply busy or distracted. Their emotional system reacts as though there is a real threat, triggering worry, overthinking, and behaviors aimed at securing reassurance. Conversely, individuals with avoidant attachment may experience intimacy as overwhelming or threatening. When a partner expresses vulnerability or seeks closeness, avoidant individuals may feel the urge to withdraw, create distance, or distract themselves. This reaction is not a reflection of a lack of love, but rather a survival strategy rooted in past experiences, where closeness was unsafe or unresponsive. What makes these patterns so powerful is that they often reinforce themselves. An anxious partner's need for reassurance can inadvertently trigger an avoidant partner's discomfort, leading to further withdrawal, which then heightens the anxious partner's fears. Over time, these cycles can create patterns of miscommunication, misunderstanding, and emotional friction that feel impossible to escape. The good news is that awareness can break this cycle. By understanding the emotional patterns that govern our reactions, we can begin to respond rather than react. This involves noticing the triggers that activate anxiety or avoidance, reflecting on their origins, and choosing behaviors that foster connection rather than reinforce fear. Books such as Hold Me Tight by Dr. Sue Johnson emphasize that creating emotional safety and responding to attachment needs can transform relationships. It is not about changing your partner or eliminating discomfort entirely. It is about developing skills to navigate emotional responses with mindfulness, empathy, and communication. With consistent awareness and practice, relationships can shift from reactive patterns to intentional interactions. Emotional triggers that once seemed uncontrollable become signals for growth and understanding. Over time, both partners can feel safer, more connected, and more capable of experiencing love without fear, creating a relationship that is not only resilient but deeply fulfilling. Have you ever held on to the belief that the way you connect, react, or respond in relationships is fixed, unchangeable, and part of who you are? Many people assume that attachment styles are permanent traits, that if you are anxious, avoidant, or secure, you are destined to remain that way. The truth, however, is far more hopeful. Attachment patterns are not rigid identities, they are learned behaviors, emotional habits formed over time through early experiences, and like any habit, they can evolve with awareness and intentional effort. Understanding that these patterns can change is the first step toward creating healthier, more fulfilling relationships. When we recognize our own attachment tendencies, whether anxious or avoidant, we gain insight into the automatic ways we respond to intimacy, conflict, and emotional closeness. This awareness allows us to pause before reacting, giving us the space to choose behaviors that foster security rather than reinforce fear. Change does not happen overnight, and it is not about forcing ourselves to act in ways that feel unnatural. It is about gradually retraining our emotional system through consistent experiences that contradict old patterns. For example, a person with anxious tendencies can learn to tolerate uncertainty without panicking when a partner needs space. A person with avoidant tendencies can practice staying present when a partner expresses vulnerability, discovering that closeness does not always lead to harm or loss of control. Supportive relationships, therapy, and intentional self-reflection play a crucial role in this transformation. As Dr. Sue Johnson explains in Hold Me Tight, creating emotional safety and responsiveness in a relationship provides the nervous system with new data, allowing old survival patterns to relax and adapt. Over time, repeated experiences of secure connection can rewire emotional responses, making intimacy less threatening and more rewarding. The key is patience and self-compassion. Change is a process, not a single event, and it requires acknowledging old patterns without judgment while practicing new ways of relating. As attachment patterns shift, relationships become spaces where both partners feel understood, valued, and emotionally safe. We move from a cycle of reactive behavior to conscious interaction, from fear-driven responses to intentional communication. What once felt automatic and limiting can gradually transform into choice and empowerment. By embracing the potential for change, we can cultivate relationships that are not defined by past wounds or survival strategies, but by awareness, emotional growth, and a capacity for love that feels secure, nurturing, and enduring. As we reflect on the intricate dance of attachment styles and emotional patterns, one truth becomes clear: the way we connect, respond, and seek closeness is shaped by our past, but it does not have to define our future. By understanding our own attachment tendencies and the unconscious patterns that guide our reactions, we gain the power to pause, reflect, and respond with awareness rather than habit. Relationships stop being arenas of repeated conflict or anxiety and become opportunities for growth, trust, and genuine connection. Emotional safety, once elusive, can be cultivated, and the fears that once controlled us can be softened through mindfulness, communication, and intentional practice. The journey towards secure, fulfilling relationships is not about perfection. It is about awareness, effort, and compass. Ion for ourselves and others. When we choose to recognize and reshape our patterns, love transforms from a source of fear or uncertainty into a place of rest, support, and mutual growth. Good luck on your journey of understanding, growth, and meaningful connection. Remember, every step you take toward awareness and emotional safety is a step toward deeper, more fulfilling relationships. Thank you for taking the time to reflect, learn, and embrace the possibilities that lie ahead.